All right. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. Thank you, everyone, for hopping on wherever you're coming from around the world. Really appreciate folks taking some time today to hang out with myself and Peter. So we'll go ahead and do a quick round of introductions so you all know who's speaking with you today. I'll start. My name is Andy Whitaker. Been with Rustici for around 14, actually today is my work
Exactly
anniversary.
14 years.
14 years today. Rustici as an organization's been around a little bit longer than that, but yeah, it was a fun milestone. As you can see from the slide, I'm one of the sales representatives here, but essentially lead the sales team. And a lot of times I do these things by myself, but today I wanted to bring Peter along for the ride, so that I so I had a friend to hang out with while talking to you today. So I'll let
Hey, I'm
Peter
happy to
say,
be your friend, Andy.
yeah, I'll let Peter say a few words about himself.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'm Peter Overton. I work closely with Andy on the sales team here. Sales at Rustici is a little bit different from sales in a lot of other places. A lot of it is kind of like what we're going to talk about today, helping understand what is it that we do, what are these products, and what problems can we help you solve. Um, I haven't been here as long as Andy. I've been here about almost 5 years, 4.5 years.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so Andy's our wizard today. He's got the knowledge of the elders. But thanks everybody for being here.
All right. I know, I'm sure somehow everybody that's on this call is probably connected to us in some form or fashion. But for folks that maybe are a little bit newer to the organization itself, we actually just celebrated our 24th anniversary a month or so ago. So been in the e-learning technology space for a long time. The organization itself is based in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just a suburb of Nashville. Um, and primarily, we focus on um, providing technology to our customers that focuses on learning standards. So, the way that I tend to talk about it is that we either help our customers to implement and adopt learning standards within their systems. So, as some of you might know, we work with a bunch of authoring tools and a bunch of learning management systems around the world. In that context, we help with enabling them to support the SCORM standard and XAPI and some other standards within their applications. Or on the other side of the sort of product spectrum that we provide, we're helping our customers to leverage SCORM standards or e-learning standards to accomplish particular things. And that's the side that we're going to talk mostly about today. It's the leveraging of standards to enable content owners, content providers, whomever they might be, to be able to successfully share their content out into the world, but do it in a particular way that we're pretty well suited to help with. Today, we've got about 65 employees. We're a little bit more distributed than we used to be. Peter and I, though, both calling in from probably East Nashville today.
I'm
Anyways.
I'm down in Franklin.
Oh, you are? Okay, you made it to
Yeah.
the office. All
Oh
right, that
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
good. Show me up.
yeah. You know.
Okay, so for the conversation that we're gonna have today, we're really talking about content distribution broadly speaking. We'll get into the specifics about the tools and capabilities that we offer in this particular space, but I want to set the stage for us to help folks on the call understand who typically comes to us with these types of problems that we help various types of organizations to solve. And so the message that Peter and I usually get from folks when they first reach out to us is that they have a customer, a partner, some organization out in the world that is coming to our potential customer and saying, "Hey, you have content. We have our own learning management system. We would love for your content to be made accessible through our LMS. We'd rather not have to send our learners or our students to an entirely separate application to consume this content. We want to make your content accessible through the learning management system that we already provide to our employees or our students or our staff. whoever it might be. And so that usually takes the shape of asking for content in a SCORM conformant package, for example, but some kind of standards-based package because that's what most LMSs are supporting. Sometimes folks come to us having already started to ship out their content to partners and customers and those folks that are asking for their content to be accessible through their own LMS. And so the analogy that we tend to fall back on in this specific use case is, think about the now big streaming service that used to ship us all red envelopes way back in the day, probably in the early aughts is when I was starting to get red envelopes in the mail anytime that I wanted to watch a new film or a TV show. And it's not unlike that old school way of shipping out movies and TV shows from the big red letter company. When it comes to how some customers or prospects come to us when they're being asked to make their content available through third-party learning management systems, a lot of those folks come to us having already started to hand over their content in its entirety to these customers or partners so that they can successfully run that content in their own LMS. And for those types of organizations, the reason that they're coming to us is enough pain has built up around this, what we would call kind of old school way of sharing content with these third party systems, to where they're like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way for us to make this content available without having to ship out the content itself. Because as you can probably understand, or if you've already run into this yourself, there's a lot of hassle that comes along with just handing over your content files to a third party application or to a customer. You're sending the whole files. You lose control of that content because there's no way to really turn off access when they've got the SCORM files themselves, for example. There's no visibility into how organizations are utilizing your content. Just a lot of potential headaches. Um, some cases there's permanent loss of intellectual property. Versioning can be a huge hassle. And so again, a lot of times this pain builds up to the point where they're like, we got to find a better way, and then they reach out to us. And Peter and I are two of the folks here that help a lot of people with that particular problem. Another quick example before I pass it over to Peter to give like the oh, but there's a better way sort of piece to this conversation. Some of you also might be content providers that have actually built their own web application. A lot of times we'll find that organizations will come to us. They've decided, you know what, we've got a certain type of content. We want to build our own website or our own web application to support that content. That content usually, in most cases, is not conforming to a learning standard. But then inevitably, a customer of that prospect of ours comes to them and says, hey, again, we love your content, but we'd love to make it available through our own LMS. And now that organization is like, first they're like, what's SCORM? Because they've never used SCORM before. And then they also want to say yes to this particular prospect or customer of theirs. And so they're wrestling with what do we do to enable this non-standards based content in our own web application to be available through a standards based system. So again, setting the stage for like the trouble or the problem set that organizations are coming to us hoping to solve. And this is part of what we're going to be talking about today, or how we do that first, and then the specific tools that we offer that can solve these types of distribution challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Um, so yeah, to kind of build on that, the often the situation that we see coming in is, like Andy said, I've handed over my intellectual property. I have no way to understand, what version of it they're using. I've sent out new versions, but I don't really know if people have started using those. And maybe I'm a small content publisher and I don't feel comfortable losing control of my intellectual property. So the solution that we propose and the way that we solve that is to say don't hand it over. What you hand over instead is just going to be a dummy proxy file, an empty SCORM package, which they can load into their LMS. And when their player launches that package, our player is going to jump in and start just kind of take over, and we'll start essentially streaming the course into their platform. So the course materials themselves will stay on your side in your control, and the thing you give them is not really a full course package. Now, importantly, it is a SCORM compliant or perhaps CMI5 or some other learning standard compliant package. So it does behave in every way like a full course package would. In fact, often the person receiving that package has no real understanding that it isn't the full course. It behaves like they would expect it to. So they can import it, they can assign it to learners, they can, send it wherever it needs to go, and learners come in, they click play, and we'll start showing them the course from your side. Um, there, it's a thing we see a little bit out in the world, but I think nobody has done it quite as robustly and agnostically as we have. Um, so essentially, the kind of we hear a lot of horror stories about either extremely heavy, legal agreements that have to go out to enforce, control over their property, or I've talked to people who they had to have back-end access to their customers' LMS platform so that they could get annual learner counts and, ensure that they weren't using it beyond the scope of a license. It's all a really, really uncomfortable kind of relationship to have with your customer. Um, and I'll take a minute just to talk about kind of another angle on this, which is it's not always that you are selling content. You may not be distributing content out to a customer. You may just have multiple LMSs that all need to have the same hand washing course. A large hospital or some company that has multiple systems under one roof. You got a lot of different learners in a lot of different places. Everyone just needs to take the same version of the course. Everyone needs that green check mark. It is much easier to kind of let our tools be the source of truth, and then you can just put courses wherever they need to be.
Mhm.
So how do we do that? And this is kind of
It's a great
the
question, Peter.
yeah. Well, thanks, Andy. Um, this is the purpose of this particular webinar. Is it turns out we offer kind of a handful of solutions that all kind of do this same thing, slightly different flavors of that. And a question we hear a lot is, what are all these things, and which one do I need? Which one fits my use case? So, kind of at a very high level, there are two that are web applications that you would, in the traditional sense that you might think of, where you can log in, there's administrative tools, there's a thing for you to look at and manage course, content and distribution and license management. And then there are two that are really just headless, more developer friendly versions of those tools. Um, we'll go into a little more detail, but SCORM Cloud and Content Controller are the kind of the most, we'll say, user friendly, the sort of easiest to understand versions of these tools. And then Rustici Dispatch and Rustici Cross Domain are the kind of the API side of things, the more sort of technical behind the scenes versions of these tools.
Yeah. And I'll add a little bit to that. The context that we usually bring Rustici Dispatch and Rustici Cross Domain into is if you are a builder of things, meaning if you are kind of building your own platforms, building your own web applications, but you are also a content provider who's needing to make that content accessible through third-party systems, or in some cases, you're a builder that has a platform, but your customers are interested in bringing their own content into your platform, but also they might have their own customers that have their own LMSs and they want to enable this third-party LMS access as well. So the Rustici Dispatch and cross-domain products are typically for those builders of things. Usually some development work is necessary to pull some things off. We'll get into more of that here in just a bit. Um, Most people, if you were probably to pull uh, I don't know, the world and ask them how they know about Rustici software. Most people in the world are probably going to know about us through our SCORM Cloud application. Um, In the context of content distribution, this is the OG. It's been an application that's been around for a couple of decades. It's where our dispatching technology started. Earlier, there was an earlier slide where we had a list of like terms that we tend to use interchangeably. Dispatch was coined within SCORM Cloud a couple of decades ago. And that is the term that we have historically used to describe these little lightweight proxy files that Peter mentioned just a moment ago, where instead of having the whole course inside of that file, it is just a simple, lightweight, typically SCORM file that can be imported and launched from an LMS, and then ultimately bring the user back to one of our applications in this context in SCORM Cloud, where we launch the content, track it, and manage access and those types of things. Um, a lot of folks know SCORM Cloud, and many of you on the call probably know SCORM Cloud for content testing. It's what most people in the world, how they kind of know or get introduced to SCORM Cloud when they first start working with it. One of the things that we want to help people understand, though, is that yes, it's a great content testing tool. Thousands of people around the world, maybe even more, tens of thousands of people around the world use it for content testing. But there's a big dispatch button that we'll show you here in just a bit in the application itself that a lot of times is either not known about or maybe misunderstood. And we're wanting to make sure that people understand that you've got more tools in the toolbox, even within SCORM Cloud, that can help solve some particular problems that folks might be dealing with. So with SCORM Cloud, you're able to host the content within the application. You're able to use Dispatch for enabling that content to be made accessible through third-party systems. We're introducing in this application for the first time a couple decades ago the concept of licensing this content. So the ability to establish expiration dates for your content, establish learner limits or registration caps related to this content, so that if you go to market with your content and license your content to a customer for 12 months and for 50 learners, we can help you enforce that so that they don't extend or go beyond the scope of the duration that you've set for them, and they don't continue to access it beyond the number of potentially learner seats that you've established. It's also where we introduce this idea of like giving content providers the ability to see what people are doing with their content, even when it's being accessed through remote systems. So SCORM Cloud has reports, and you can see on a course by course basis and across particular customers how they're utilizing the content itself. I'll also mention invitations are highlighted on this slide as well. This is unique to SCORM Cloud. There are some customers who use SCORM Cloud specifically for dispatch. Occasionally, we'll have customers that will have their own customers or partners that don't have their own learning management system. They need to, but they still need to send or share content with direct end users or learners directly. And so SCORM Cloud has a unique feature called invitations. We're not going to get into it in great detail today, but it is something that enables the sharing of content and training materials with users directly, learners directly, who don't have access to an LMS. So if that's something that piques your interest, feel free to reach out and we can take a look at that in more detail. As Peter mentioned, it's got a user interface. As many of you probably know, it's an application that you log into. Administrators of SCORM Cloud have all the tools necessary within that to import content, to create dispatches, to set licenses, to view reports, all of that great stuff. One of the nice things about SCORM Cloud, though, is if you also have some developer capability, there is a full RESTful API that the application provides. We have some customers that actually use SCORM Cloud for dispatch, but actually do it through a separate application, and the API would unlock a lot of those capabilities. As we start to get into content controller here in just a bit, one of the differentiations between the two applications is that SCORM Cloud does tend to be used as more of a lighter weight kind of getting started application for a lot of folks in the context of dispatch. And so for a lot of folks that come to Peter and I who are very new to content distribution, maybe they've never done it before. Maybe they have a relatively small course library. Maybe it's, 5 courses, 10 courses, something like that. Maybe they have a relatively small number of organizations or customers or partners that they're needing to share that content with initially. SCORM Cloud for most folks is a really great way to get started. It's a kind of a lighter weight application, whereas Content Controller might be a bit more enterprise level, which Peter will talk about here in just a bit. To give you kind of a flavor of SCORM Cloud, again, many of you are probably already familiar with the application. But this is the application itself. Content gets hosted within SCORM Cloud through the Add Content button here. This is the case for Content Controller as well, so I'll steal a little bit of Peter's thunder, but you can do standards-based files through SCORM Cloud. You can also host and share some media file types as well, PDFs, MP3s, MP4s. You'll host that content within SCORM Cloud. And then what a lot of people might not be familiar with is this button right here. So when you have organizations out in the world that are interested in accessing your content through their own LMS, but you don't want to hand over the files themselves, in SCORM Cloud, we call these dispatches. So you will create dispatches. Ultimately, when you are sharing content with an organization, a third-party system, with SCORM Cloud, you're creating individual dispatches for each course that you're interested in sharing with them. So you would go and create, potentially, let's say you have 5 courses that you're wanting to share. You'll create 5 distinct dispatches. Each one will have the same destination. Destination is the term that we use in SCORM Cloud to signify a customer in most cases or a partner of some kind. And then you can see here within the interface, there's some license management as well. So this is showing you how long this particular dispatch can be accessed via the third-party system. And then if you have a registration cap set, it can cap the number of essentially unique users that can access this content through that system. This is what a dispatch file looks like coming out of SCORM Cloud. It is a zip file, as Peter mentioned earlier. In most cases, in the case of SCORM Cloud, it's definitely going to be a SCORM 1.2 package. It's very lightweight. You can see it's about 14 kilobytes in size, and that's because it doesn't actually contain the content itself. It simply represents that specific piece of content. It is, in fact, a SCORM file that can be successfully imported and launched through a third-party LMS. But because it doesn't contain the content itself, we get to do those interesting, fun things like turn off access, make sure versioning can be done very easily, have access to reports and utilization metrics, all of that fun stuff. As I mentioned before, great lightweight way to get started. If you are the type of organization that is maybe further down the path of distribution, or you've got a more robust course library, maybe a lot more customers or prospects or partners that you're interested in sharing your content with. A lot of cases, Content Controller is probably going to be the better fit in those moments.
Yeah. I often will describe SCORM Cloud as the Swiss Army knife, right? So it's small, it's lightweight, it's great for a quick thing that you need to do, and it can scale. I mean, you could prepare a full meal using only a Swiss Army knife. You could build, I don't know, small cabin using a Swiss Army knife, but probably if you're doing a very large project, you would be happier with a kitchen or a dedicated workshop of tools. So um, SCORM Cloud is often the right place to start. It'll fit many use cases. I think, and people come in a lot with questions about these two things really seem very similar. What is the difference here? I think the difference tends to come down to questions around the scale. So, like the number of learners that you need to serve, but maybe more importantly, the number of destinations, the number of customers or sort of distinct LMSs that you would be sharing content with. Um, That's a place where Content Controller really starts to shine. So Content Controller is kind of the all grown up version of SCORM Cloud's dispatch tool.
Hmm.
Um, so basically, Content Controller adds this ability to it uses what we call accounts, which is essentially that would be the equivalent to a destination in SCORM Cloud. One key difference here is that with an account, you can set a license that covers the whole account. So I can share 150 courses with a specific customer, and I can just say, hey, they've got access for 1 year for all of these courses. And then if they want to renew in the next year, I can add another year to that license. Um, that same task in SCORM Cloud would require going into each of those 150 dispatches and extending that license. So you can imagine how whoever it is who manages that distribution and that license management, they tend to feel very strongly that Content Controller is the better fit if they are operating at a larger scale like that. There's a couple other important distinctions here. SCORM Cloud is a SaaS tool. It is it's something that we just host in the cloud. It's hosted in US East. It can't be privately hosted the way that Content Controller can. This is an
Hmm.
application where we would spin up a private hosting environment just for you and your content and all of your learner data, and everything gets captured into that private environment. No shared services. Um, Also, just on a kind of technical point, Andy sort of referenced this, but SCORM Cloud, it can import all of these content type, basically every flavor of SCORM, every kind of learning standard that you might publish, PDFs, MP4s, MP3s. Um, but SCORM Cloud can only export, can only share a proxy file in SCORM 1.2 or LTI if you want to start playing with the API. Um, Content Controller can export a much wider variety of learning standards. So it ends up for some customers being maybe less of a licensing and distribution tool and more of a tool that allows them to publish content in whatever format they like to publish, whatever's best for the content, and then share it with whatever LMS needs to have it in any standard. So
Hmm.
they might publish CMI5 content and then share it out to Moodle using a SCORM 1.2 proxy file. There, you kind of become decoupled from the actual course content and then the standard that it's shared with. So there's a lot more flexibility with Content Controller um, in that regard.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, for I think when you're operating at scale, Content Controller often is the right fit. SCORM Cloud is a great place to dip your toes in the water. For a lot of people, this is a new venture. This is the thing they've had a few clients come to them and say, we love your courses, but our learners already log in over here. Can we just have your content so we don't have to come to your platform? Um, if this is a new thing, SCORM Cloud is an easy place to kind of get up and running and figure out, is there something here? Is this going to take off? And once you know that, you can then sort of pivot or sort of grow into Content Controller later on.
Yeah. We'll do a quick kind of walkthrough of this application as well, just to give you a sense of what it looks like. So this will highlight in kind of walking through the sections of Content Controller, some of what Peter was mentioning before about some of the important differences in how the application is sort of set up, and how it's used and why it tends to be a better fit for folks that are at sort of a larger scale. Um, when you log into the application, you end up in the content area of the tool. Similar to as Peter mentioned, importing content. This is something that you're going to be doing with your SCORM files or your CMI5 packages, whatever it might be. The media files types are going to be in there as well. On the previous slide, or one of the previous slides you saw, I think there's a reference to adding some capability for even dispatching things like YouTube videos, Vimeo videos. Those are things that are going to be coming, I believe, later this year, or perhaps early next. Um, One of the important things, and this will sort of dovetail into the Rustici cross-domain part of the conversation this morning, is Content Controller also has Rustici cross-domain built into it. Now we haven't talked about that yet, and so some of this will make a bit more sense when we transition to the Rustici cross-domain portion of the conversation this morning. But Content Controller has this capability of Rustici cross-domain built in. I'll kind of circle back to that here. We'll circle back to that here in just a bit to kind of highlight that for you. But that is a distinction between SCORM Cloud and Content Controller. You can basically share some additional types of content with organizations that you wouldn't be able to do with SCORM Cloud on its own. So your content, gets imported and hosted through Content Controller. You can organize content based on, folders within the application. You can see some iconography here. So like this is your PDF and your video and your SCORM file. Once your content's loaded into the system, then one of the next thing that you're going to do is probably want to create accounts. This again is where Peter made the distinction between SCORM Cloud. If you had let's say, customer, you wanted to share 50 courses with that customer. In SCORM Cloud, you are going to have to go in and create 50 different dispatches, set the licensing at each individual dispatch level, and then export out the dispatch files and share that with that particular customer. A bit more efficient in Content Controller. Like Peter mentioned, you're establishing the account. And then at the account level, you can tell Content Controller, okay, how long should this account or customer have access to the content that I'm sharing with them? And we've got a few different ways to restrict access. So there's obviously the effective date. This is when they can start accessing the content. There's the expiration date. That's when their access ends. And then there's a learner limit, as well as a registration limit. But essentially, this is the mechanism that the system has for restricting the size of the population that can access the content through the third-party system that this organization might be using. When you create the account, then your next step is typically to go into the content tab. You're going to add content to their content tab based on what you've imported into the application. It will mirror the organization in the master content library portion of the tool. So these are the programs that I've decided that need to be made available through the Acme LMS. And then similar to SCORM Cloud, essentially what's happening here is that you're creating the dispatch files or proxy files that you will then share with that organization. But as Peter mentioned, the variety of standards that these dispatch files out of Content Controller can conform to just mostly enable our customers to be able to say yes to more organizations. If you ran across a customer that for whatever reason was using an LMS that only supported AICC, that would be incredibly strange, but probably has happened once or twice in the history of time. You wouldn't be able to share those courses through SCORM Cloud because the dispatch only conforms to SCORM 1.2, whereas in Content Controller, we have AICC as a dispatch or proxy file standard, along with the other standards that you're seeing here in the drop-down menu. Beyond that, then, on the reporting side of things, you're getting, reporting around licenses with Content Controller. You're getting reports around the utilization of your content. So there are similar views in SCORM Cloud where you can actually see all of the data associated with a particular course. That's what you're seeing here in the summary report for the All About Golf course. This is all the data that the system's collected across all the launches of this course across all accounts. Again, SCORM Cloud has some similar reporting on question level detail, but Content Controller has the questions tab where if you have a quiz or an assessment, you can actually see the question, you can see the possible answers, you can see the breakdown of how students or learners answered those questions. And then if you're really interested in drilling into a specific customer or account, the learner tab is where you go for that information. So I'm interested in just seeing the utilization for Acme Inc. So I can drill down into that account, select that particular course that I'm interested in, and see even all the individual learners that have accessed that content. So some similar views in SCORM Cloud as well. This is how we're representing that content in Content Controller. So hopefully just giving you a little bit of a taste of what these applications look like. As we mentioned earlier, Content Controller, SCORM Cloud, these are the two applications that actually have user interfaces that we can show you. The next ones, though, that we're going to jump into are what Peter mentioned before are the headless applications. And as I mentioned um, earlier, these tend to be the solutions that we license to, again, builders of things. These are platform providers typically that are interested in enabling content sharing with third-party systems. So, Rustici cross domain. This is a pretty unique, interesting solution. Um, Earlier, I mentioned that there are some customers or prospects that come to us that have, for whatever reason, decided to build their own web application, or it might just be a simple website. They decided that, maybe part of their business was to build and deliver training content, compliance courses, whatever that might be. They determined uh, they either determined that their content needed to be custom made, or they just wanted to have their own web application where that content was sort of natively authored within. In some cases, we talk to folks that have made those decisions about building their own website, publishing their own content in a non-standards based way within that website, most sometimes because they didn't even know about the SCORM standard. They didn't know about authoring tools like Storyline and Captivate and Domino. And so they thought that the only way for them to build the kind of content that they were wanting to make available to their customers was to build a website and author that content directly within that website, usually with a content management system of some kind. However, a lot of times when you make that decision and you build that website where that content is hosted and accessible, it's fine when you get started. A lot of your customers are happy to come to you directly to create user accounts, log in, access the content directly within that web application. But in our experience, inevitably, you're going to come across an organization, and typically it's going to be one of your biggest customers or biggest prospects that has their own learning management system. They might have Cornerstone or SumTotal or Saba or some LMS that we've never even heard of. And they come to you and they say, "We love your content, but we have this LMS and we really need to deliver your content through that third party system." Um, and a lot of times, again, they're going to ask you for SCORM files. And a lot of cases, people will be like, "I have no idea what SCORM is. We've never used it before." They Google SCORM, they find us, and then they reach out and say, "How can I make my content accessible or launched through a SCORM conformant LMS?" And so, again, if it's the scenario where you've built a custom application, what we don't want you to have to do is go through this big recreation process of your library. We don't want you to have to go and like get an authoring tool, rebuild all your content using a tool like Rise or Storyline, for example, just so you can publish SCORM files and then make that content available through the customer's LMS. Instead, what we would recommend doing is implementing Rustici cross domain. Ultimately, what cross domain does is very similar to the dispatching technologies that we've already talked about. At the end of the day, what you end up providing to your customer or your partner are still proxy files. They're still little dispatch files that they put into their LMS. The biggest difference, though, is that instead of having that proxy file launch into something like SCORM Cloud and launch a SCORM file, instead we help bring the user all the way back to your web application, where they can actually launch the content directly within your website, within your web application. You can track them in your own proprietary way within that application because, again, they're coming all the way back to your domain, to your application. And then we provide you with mechanisms to share data back into the third party system. So, sharing through SCORM, sharing through AICC, sharing through XAPI. The file size is still very small because, again, it doesn't the proxies don't contain the content itself. Versioning is incredibly simple because we're bringing them all the way to you. All you have to do is update the content within your own application. And now the next time that proxy file is launched for that specific piece of content, they're going to see the updated piece of content automatically. You never have to resubmit files or swap out files on third-party LMSs. Um, and most importantly, like with all of these solutions, it's a single implementation, it's a single integration, in this case to your application, and now you're compatible with basically every LMS in the world because we're using, again, standards to make all of this happen. So custom application, non-standards based content, if that's you, then Rustici cross domain is really the right fit. Now, we do have other prospects and customers that come to us that have built their own learning management system that already maybe supports SCORM content and other standards-based content, but now they've got this need or desire to share standards-based content with a third-party system. And that's where Dispatch comes in.
Yeah. So yeah, the I think the way to think about both cross-domain and dispatch is that these are the technology that lives under the hood in these other tools. So you can almost think of Rustici Dispatch as content controller, but without the front end application. So it is just the sort of the technology that allows you to take a standards based package and share out a proxy, a dispatch version of that package. Um, the it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that content controller has. It doesn't have all the kind of front end kind of magic and stuff that is already baked into content controller. But the typical customer who is looking specifically at cross domain or specifically at Rustici Dispatch, they already have an application or they're building an application and they don't really want a second application to have to log into and manage content. What they really want is that functionality, but baked into their own platform.
Mhm.
So, kind of a simple way to put it would be I want a button in my application that when I click it or when a customer clicks it, it spits out a proxy file that I can then share out to the customer's LMS. So whereas cross domain is ideal for content that doesn't really fit into a SCORM shaped box, or you don't want to republish all your stuff, like Andy was saying. It also might be that you've built amazing simulations and stuff that just really doesn't work with SCORM. Um, and dispatch is really the same thing, but kind of for more standards based stuff.
Mhm.
I, I want to point at one thing here. We talk a lot about bringing the learner to your system or bringing the learner to content controller. That is technically correct, but from the learner's perspective, it's important to know that they won't feel like they've been brought anywhere. They are still in their system. I
Yeah,
developers
it's a good point.
probably like this is not technically the right way to say it, but we're like piping in your content into their system. Um, Technically they have left their environment, so but they won't know that. They're seeing like a series of child frames in their LMS. A learner would have no idea that they are no longer in Cornerstone or Moodle or wherever they started.
Right.
um, so yeah, that kind of the real important distinction here is just that dispatch, yes, it lives in SCORM Cloud, it lives in content controller, but if you want to peel back all that front end stuff, you don't want to have to, go somewhere and log in and manage licensing and look at reporting. Dispatch is the tool for you. Um, Candidly, it's a lot less common that that's what people need because most people are happy to have all the license management tools. The stuff that's baked into Content Controller is pretty nifty. It works really well.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I wanted to circle back a little bit because I know I hinted to the cross-domain support that Content Controller provides, and that before we
right.
actually talked about Content or Rustici cross-domain itself. That is one of the unique things about Content Controller is that it actually has both Dispatch and Rustici cross-domain built into it. And so one interesting use case that does sometimes come up more times than not is that we might have a customer that comes to us that um, sells their content into the education space. So they've got K through 12 customers, they've got college, university customers. They've built their own web application where all their content lives. And then sometimes, like with SCORM, inevitably they'll come across a customer or prospect that says, "Hey, we use Canvas as our LMS, or we use Moodle or Schoology or something like that." And they're actually asking instead of SCORM, they're actually asking for LTI to make that connection. And so that's a use case where Content Controller plus Rustici cross domain, because it supports LTI as a sort of proxy connector. It's not technically a file that you're exporting. It's a direct sort of connection type of scenario, but it can enable this proprietary application that doesn't conform to LTI to connect with LTI conformant LMSs. And we leverage cross-domain under the hood to make that possible. But essentially, Rust or Content Controller just functions as your LTI connector in that way. Same thing could be the case for launching from a SCORM file or in an LMS and coming back to your system. If for some reason you like having a user interface that has licensing and some other things built into it, some folks do end up deciding to use Content Controller plus Rustici cross domain for that. But if you really want, like Peter was mentioning, if you really want that seamless connection where they just log into your application, there's a little button that allows them to publish a proxy file directly within your application UI, then implementing cross-domain directly within your application is usually the right thing to do. Okay, so this is a really, really helpful slide that our great marketing team put together as they were building out this. I would say take this as an opportunity to grab a screenshot or take a picture if you're so inclined. It's a really nice, comprehensive comparison of the four different tools that we've talked about today. Um, I will say a couple things on this slide and let Peter chime in as well. For folks that do want things to be a bit more programmatic, maybe you've got some other internal systems, you want some, things that once something happens in one system to happen in one of our tools. Both SCORM Cloud and Content Controller, you can see here, do have like optional APIs that they make available. Even though there's the application front end that most people are working within, logging in, using the UI and UX of the application itself, there are opportunities for automating some things between another system that you might have and our application, SCORM Cloud or Content Controller. Content Controller also has this option for direct to user launches as well. So SCORM Cloud, we mentioned invitations as a way that we handle that. In Content Controller, we haven't spent much time talking about it, but I will mention you'll see here this optional launcher add-on that we have here. So if you do have learners that don't have their own LMS, but you're still needing to make that content that you're hosting in Content Controller available to those users, then we can talk about the launcher add-on in those particular cases. I don't know, Peter, if you had anything else to
Yeah.
highlight on this page.
Yeah, just the kind of a use case we see with Launcher is maybe a healthcare system. They've got their sort of in-house LMS that they use, but they have people who are not technically employees, but who do need to understand what to do around bloodborne pathogens or slips, trips, and falls and other types of safety training. So they don't have access to the company LMS. They don't have an email address, but you still need to get the training to them. So that's a case for Launcher or perhaps invitations.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that this is a helpful breakdown. That we didn't go deep into the weeds on Content Controller. It does a lot of other little things that the SCORM Cloud doesn't quite do. Again, it's the all grown up version. That there is the API, like Andy was mentioning. It can also send out webhooks. So that can be a more elegant way to handle reporting rather than like pulling all of the launch history for every learner in every course and doing that every month. Perhaps it would be better to have when a thing happens, when somebody passes a course or fails a course or something, have that trigger a webhook, which could be sent out to a third party system And that system, if it's listening for webhooks, would be able to then do something, issue a certificate or update a database or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you want to get deep in the technical weeds, there's a lot you can do with these tools.
Yeah, the last thing I'll mention is oh, go back is equivalence. That
Oh
was
yeah,
also a bit of content controller that we didn't really talk about, but really just keep in mind that if you have content that you offer in multiple languages, and you're wanting an efficient way to make those multi-language courses again launchable and tracked through a third-party learning management system. Content Controller has a feature called equivalence that helps with that specific problem. It prevents you from having to kind of build these massive SCORM files that have all the different languages sort of baked in, which can be a kind of a complicated developer project in a lot of cases. It just really simplifies that whole process. So one of our several of our customers have courses that they offer in 10, 20 different languages, and equivalence makes it super easy for them to share that kind of content. Ultimately, what you find is you share a single proxy file, the learner launches it, and then the learner actually gets to select which language they take the course in. So it simplifies that entire process more for your customer or your partner than for yourself. You've got to build some things in the application, which is not difficult to do, but it definitely helps solve that particular multi-language problem. Um,
yeah, it's a good point.
okay, so I think we've reached the end of what we had prepared for you today. So I know we've got about 9 minutes left, and I think
There are a lot of good
Peter has been
questions here.
monitoring the questions as we've gone through. So let's take the next 10 minutes, 9 minutes or so to
Yeah,
go through these.
I'm kind of going out of order here. I just looked over here and immediately I see one that I think this is a relevant question from Nick Blackburn. He said, for SCORM Cloud, would uploading a source file that has a different SCORM format, i.e. SCORM 2004 rather than 1.2, would that impact functionality and compatibility of the dispatch?
Hmm,
Um,
great question.
this is a really yeah, this is an important question. Essentially, the way that I would think about this is the content that you import into Content Controller, whatever
Or Storm,
standard that
Storm
is,
Cloud in this case.
or SCORM
Yeah,
Cloud, or
yeah,
yeah, when you're using any of these dispatch approaches,
yeah,
we're always going to capture whatever the course was designed to report
yeah,
on your side. So SCORM Cloud Content Controller will capture if the course is SCORM 2004 and it's reporting interactions, we're going to capture that in SCORM Cloud or Content Controller. Now, if you've shared that out using a proxy file that is SCORM 1.2, the destination LMS, they don't have the pipes to receive that additional data. We're going to push down everything we can to their LMS. And if you're sharing it out as SCORM 2004, then you have parity and they're going to see everything that you would see. But there are occasions where you will actually see more reporting inside of Content Controller or SCORM Cloud than the customer would in their LMS. It won't impact the functionality.
right.
It'll work. You're always basically going to see kind of the big four scormy things: time, completion, pass, fail, score. Um, but yeah, there are moments where you're actually going to see more detailed reporting than the launching LMS might.
Yeah, and the term that we tend to use is decoupled. The content that the standard that your content conforms to is really decoupled from the standard that the proxy file conforms to. So it actually makes that a pretty elegant solution for supporting LMSs that have different standards from what your content supports.
Okay, so here's another one for you, Andy. Are the content controller dashboards for reporting configurable in any way? This is from Laura Ashley Timms.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I would say that they are not necessarily configurable. I guess configurable could be understood differently, but it's not content controller reports are not reports that you can go into and say, okay, I want to see a pie chart, a unique or custom pie chart or bar chart that shows, this set of data in this particular way. Reports within all of these applications that we've shown today are built to show specific set of data and visualize them in the way that those reports are designed. So they're dynamically populated because we're always pulling in fresh data into those reporting user interfaces. But they're not reports where you can like go in and slice and dice things. However, that's where the API might come into play. If you have a team of data analysts, business analysts, maybe you use Power BI or Tableau or some other, business intelligence tool, there is an opportunity for you to grab data from one of our systems and pipe that in somewhere else if you want to merge that with some other data somewhere else and maybe build more sophisticated reporting. We're here mostly at this time to show, as Peter mentioned, kind of what are the big four: completion, pass, fail, score, time. Question level detail is something that we're well suited to report on also.
Yeah, and those reports are shareable. So
Sure.
via either a live updating link or a CSV. Again, webhooks might be interesting here, but yeah, the actual dashboards themselves are kind of they look the way they look.
Yeah.
Um, okay, we've got a lot. We're not going to be able to get to all of these. Just choosing one here from Robin Wisner. Has anyone successfully implemented SCORM Cloud with SkillJar? We're not able to use a webhook directly from SCORM Cloud to SkillJar. We need some middleman code hosted internally. Curious if you've done this and how it went.
I'm not personally familiar with that, but that might only be because, Peter and I are more on the sales side of things and not on like frontline support. Um, Definitely something that we would love to talk to you about and see what opportunities might be available there. If you want to reach out to us and we can schedule some time. This is typically a time where we would probably start pulling in some other really smart people from our team. And if you're using SCORM Cloud and you have the opportunity to use the API in some way, we've got the right technical know-how on our side. But I haven't seen that personally. Um, some of the challenges around that, though, just to highlight them for you, is that even though we provide an API that will enable you to do lots of different things within the SCORM Cloud application, the SkillJar system might or might not have the right set of APIs or even access that allow for things that are happening in SCORM Cloud to impact things in SkillJar or vice versa. So it's definitely going to be something that we would want to explore further together. Unfortunately, I don't have a good clear-cut answer for you today.
All right, we've got maybe one more here. The rest we'll follow up with you guys. We'll send out some answers for you.
Yeah.
Gary asked, "Is Rustici cross domain the only solution that we would self-host?" This is a great
Oh,
question.
yeah, great question. You want to answer that
Um,
one, Peter?
Yeah, so yes, it's kind of. You don't have to self-host any of these. So Content Controller can be self-hosted, Dispatch can be self-hosted. Cross-domain, yeah, it's not.
Has to be.
Yes, yeah, it's not really a yes. It's more like code, templates,
Yeah.
and JavaScript. So yes, that is self-hosted always. But the rest, so SCORM Cloud is always managed hosted. That's something that lives in the cloud that can't be self-hosted. Content Controller and Rustici Dispatch, you can go either way. We can
Mhm.
privately host those for you in any region of AWS, or you can host them yourselves on your own infrastructure if you needed to.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah,
Let's
I think so.
see.
We've got a
Yeah.
couple minutes left.
If an enterprise client uses an LMS mobile app that allows for offline viewing, will SCORM Cloud
Ah,
dispatch proxy file work offline, or does the proxy
oh,
file
yeah,
require constant
this is
active? Yeah.
yeah, this is a tough one. Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is no. Everything that we've shown you today really requires there to be an active internet connection and an active browser session. There's technical reasons for that. It's mostly based on how we're communicating back and forth between these systems. It's all happening through the browser itself, using JavaScript for the most part. And so that does end up requiring there be an active internet connection. Um, for It's either unfortunate or not, depending on your perspective. If you do have a customer that has an LMS that offers offline support, the answer is just you gotta kind of give them your files at that point, in order for that to be supported.
Yeah. We can solve offline SCORM. but not across this kind of dispatch
Right. Not
connection.
between specific domains. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question.
We might not have enough time for one more, Peter, but so maybe we'll wrap things up for now. So I know that we will endeavor to answer all the questions that came in. So thank you so much for participating in that way.
Yes, amazing.
It's
Thank
so
you.
much more exciting to see people engaged and asking questions than to end a presentation to crickets. So thank you so much for that. I'll say from my perspective, this has been great. I'm so grateful for folks that have taken the time. We're always appreciative of that. And if you have anything that you'd like to discuss further, come to rusticysoftware.com, fill out the form to contact us. Depending on the day, you'll either hear from me or you'll hear from Peter. Or you'll hear from Philip. Philip kind of leads the business side of SCORM Cloud as well. So a lot of times we'll get Peter or Philip involved if it's a SCORM Cloud related things. But yeah, again, really appreciate the time. You want to say goodbye, Peter?
Yeah, just thanks everybody. Thank you for all the questions. And seriously, ask us anything really. There's a
Yeah,
reason that says that all over our website.
that's right. That's right. Thanks, everyone.